Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chula Gunasekara. I'm presenting this talk today as a layman on the topic that we all are interested in, and that's what is a true democracy. I'm sure there'll be quite a few people who are very familiar or very knowledgeable about the subject, and I would invite them to speak at the end of the presentation so we can have a formal discussion. Firstly, I will show a short video which I've edited to suit our environment, and then we will take it further from there.
I think this video will make some people angry.
Really? What is it?
Well, it's about democracy.
Democracy is good, right?
Well, that's exactly the problem. Hi, let's talk about democracy. When I was a kid, I was taught that democracy is the best. When you give one vote to one human and you let them vote in elections, you get a good government. But now that I'm older, I realize that I am wrong. The average voter doesn't know how to vote, and that's why democracy doesn't work. Take this example. Let's assume you're going on a plane, but before you fly, you and the passengers must democratically elect a captain. So you get two candidates. The first one says, if you let me fly the plane, I will abide by international laws of aviation and fly at 30,000 feet. But the second one says, if you let me fly the plane, you can sit in business class. And in today's world, the average person votes based on emotions and lack of information. So naturally, they will vote for the person that promised them a business class. Democracy will elect a terrible person who's never flown a plane. And before you know it, we vote. I am convinced that running a government is just like flying a plane. It's hard and it takes experience, years and years of experience. Tariffs, nuclear weapons, geopolitics, healthcare, borders. These problems need real professionals. It takes 10 years to be able to fly a plane. But in our government, anyone can vote and anyone can run. Democracy changes government every 4 years, but the real problems need 20 years to fix. Democracy is a good idea, but is it the best idea? Don't get me wrong. Dictatorship is not the answer. It is never the answer. But for now, the problem is real. In the world's biggest democracies, politicians use fake news, lies, fears, and free money to get attention. And the democratic system allows voters to believe them in the millions. We are voting for people who promise us a business class and they don't even know how to fly. As someone once famously said, the best case against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. Let's fix democracy before we all crash. See you next week.
So we have just given a little summary how the democracy can go wrong. And Leads is our purpose in Leads is to try and learn as much as possible, educate and promote the voter base so that voters know what are the real facts and evidence and what should be done. We assess using logic with good background, so everyone will know how to use the logic and use good knowledge to make good decisions and decide accordingly. And hopefully Sri Lanka will start moving upwards again with better living standards. That's our plan. We invite people to come and talk about subjects of interest nationally in English, Sinhala, or Tamil. And if there are people who can add subtitles to the talks already given, I welcome that as well. Thank you. So a good democracy is actually very fragile. This is why it's so important that the voters have to be fully informed of what's going on. Franklin Roosevelt is a leading president in the USA who's run 4 terms consecutively. And he says that the liberty of a democracy is not safe if the people tolerated the growth of private power to a point where it becomes stronger than the democratic state itself. That in its essence is fascism. That's ownership of government by an individual, by a group, or by controlling private power. I just give example of meaning of fascism means it's an authoritarian hierarchical government. And we've seen this recently. Here is a report from October 2021 that was published in Sunday Times saying, all powerful government bows to all powerful rights media. And there were cartoons, pictures in the public media that you could see who were summarizing the story. So now we can see how the democracy is becoming very fragile. Franklin Roosevelt again said that true individual freedom cannot exist without economical security and independence. People who are hungry and out of a job are the stuff of which dictatorships are made. Now here, poor economy is a good breeding ground for dictatorships. And we are in a fragile situation as a country in relation to this. Take, for example, Venezuela. This is a report that was published in 2017. And the text that I read here is exactly what was published at that time. This refers to Nicolas Mondres Moros, who is the president of Venezuela since 2013. Now, Mondro in 2017 is tossing political opponents in prison. He is cracking down on growing street protests with lethal force, with government security forces killing at least 46 demonstrators in recent months. He has repeatedly postponed regional government elections in order to stave off threats to his party power. And in July, he held a rigged election for a special legislative body that supplanted the country's parliament, that means replaced, the one branch of government that was controlled by his political opposition. The new super body has carte blanche powers to rewrite the country's constitution and expand his executive powers. Now let's see the background as what has happened. He became president in 2013. And at that time, the peak income of the country, that's the GDP, was 352 million US dollars. That equated to roughly about 16,000 US dollars per capita. This dropped to, by 2017, to 43 million for the country. That means about $2,000 per capita. Now you can see why people are protesting and so on. Their incomes have dropped. The money in its numbers may be the same, but the value of the money has dropped. So people can't live. So you have a situation when the country's economy goes down, it creates chaos. Now let's look at the Sri Lanka situation. This is our GDP per capita, and this peaked to $4,000 in 2017 and 2018, and now it has started to reduce. This is 2020, and we don't know what 22, 21, and 22 is. It's probably lower than this. So again, now we can see that you're getting into an environment where there'll be people who cannot really manage. Noam Chomsky is a cognitive scientist and a historian, a social critic, and a political activist. He's still living. And he said, you can't have meaningful political democracy without functioning economic democracy. The most effective way to restrict democracy is to transfer decision-making from the public arena to unaccountable institutions, kings and princesses or priestly castes, military juntas, party dictatorships, or modern corporations. Now you can easily see a pattern that's applicable worldwide. So see the situation for us in Sri Lanka. My own experience in 1980, when I became an intern doctor, my starting salary was 600 rupees a month. At that time, $1 was equal to 7 Sri Lankan rupees. Now 22, I believe intern doctor starting salary is 60,000 a month, but the $1 is now 210 Sri Lankan rupees. See the devaluation which goes with this. So although the numbers have gone up in local currency, the value has dropped, and even this may not be enough for people to live. So our rescue is everyone's responsibility. So that is why we are trying to say whether people can support and then share opinions and share knowledge, etc. There are two things that we've identified, if possible. Reduce wastage in the country. Now, wastage means wastage of public money. Take one, road traffic accidents. This is a huge wastage for the country. At the moment, it's about 3 to 4% of the GDP that we are losing because of human loss, life loss, and the property damage. So have we done enough research to try to see how to reduce this? Have we implemented it? This is something that we can talk separately. And the road traffic accidents, carnage is going up and up and up in the country. Corruption is huge. This is something that we need to talk about at whatever the level, because that has to come down, and that is wastage for public money. Then transport. We have improved transport infrastructure, but for people, the transport is very difficult. It probably takes longer to travel now than it was, say, 20, 30 years ago because of the traffic chaos. So we have not really improved transport as such for working class. Then the manpower. The manpower wastage is another problem, because if you put inappropriate people in positions, they will do wrong things and the others will have to correct it. And also at the same time, if you put too many people for a smaller job, then that's wastage of public money. So manpower wastage is another thing that we can reduce. Then the political spending, which is there's a term called pork barrel. I will explain this shortly, what it is, and then we'll know how relevant that to us. Then there's political white elephants. Then again, the public has to pay for these things. But again, I'll give an explanation on what public elephants means in the next slide. Then we have, obviously, people have to show their resistance, their anger with strikes, protests, and violence, but they will also add to our wastage of public money. Then the man-made queues are not going to help us because we just waste time on the queues without engaging in our normal daily work. Research and innovation is a must, which we are not really focusing too much on at the moment in a public sense. And that's important to reduce wastage. So there's so many other topics that we can talk about, and more knowledgeable people who are in the audience can come out with these things, and please write to us about the topics that may be relevant. But we also have at the same time to increase productivity. Education. Now, education, when people talk about, we talk about school education, maybe university education, not very much. We're not really talking about postgraduate education, which is essential, then education in every age, so people can get more productive and equality in education. So these things are important aspects. Appraisal is maybe a term that's new to us in Sri Lanka, but appraisal means that people will assess themselves with their peers or seniors every year what needs to be done to improve their service and also develop themselves. So everyone get an opportunity to talk with their peers or seniors, what they want to do in their job and what they would want to say, if they want to go for a course, if they want to do something, if they want to change their job plan, all that can be discussed in an appraisal. So what happens is when the productivity of individuals improve, the productivity of the institution improves. This is why we have to address this at very lower level so that the productivity increases for the country. Now, agro-monetization, I feel so sorry for all the farmers because they work so hard, but their earnings are so much less and can't meet the ends. The reason is agro-modernized countries will produce the same thing that we are producing. For example, we want to produce rice. If it's done here in Sri Lanka, it's so expensive. But if you're doing it elsewhere, it's more. So the agro-modernized countries will produce it quite cheaper. So people resort to import them rather than to support our people. So agro-modernized. Then you have to have motivation, giving incentives, etc., to people who try to improve productivity. The leadership has to be on merit because I can't, for example, go and give leadership to someone who is doing, say, carpentry or fishing or something, another profession. So the professionals on their own profession should give leadership to their institutions. Peace, friendship, trust, and unity is essential. Quality assurance is another area that is essential to increase productivity of a particular institution. And unfortunately, we are not applying this widely in any of the government institutions. Research and innovation is again essential, and so on and so on. Now, I said I used two terms. We use pork barrel. Pork barrel is spending, or pork refers to politicians spending taxpayers' money on their constituents primarily to generate political support. This is something familiar to us. Then white elephants means refers to a possession that is useless or troublesome, especially one that is expensive to maintain or difficult to dispose of. Now here we got so many white elephants in the country for the maintenance cost has to come from public pocket. So for both of these, the burden is 100% on public. We have to pay, especially the working class. Now, corruption, I will just briefly mention here where we are. Corruption is assessed in the world with what is called Corruption Perception Index. It goes from 0 to 100. And in 2020, Sri Lanka's score is 37. And we were ranked 102 in the scale. So you can see the greener countries, the highest greener countries are darkest here. You can see the corruption is minimal in Germany, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. All the other countries are not at the highest level, but if you look at Sri Lanka, we are somewhere here in the red area. So there is so much to be done to improve that. So how do we safeguard democracy? And an American editor said the democracy's real test lies in its respect for minority opinion. Now, this is crucial. The same thing was said by the American president who served 4 terms, said, no democracy can long survive which does not accept as fundamental to its very existence the recognition of the rights of minorities. Very important statements. Here, Shaheen Najafi is an Iranian musician, author, philosopher, and a political activist. And he says the most important element of democracy, I believe, is the protection of minorities. So there's something that we need to do quite openly about recognition, respect, and protection of minorities. Now, I'll give you a definition for the minority. There's no legal definition for this. The best accepted definition is national minority means most generally a minority of citizens of the country, nationals of the state, who have certain characteristics which are different from those of the majority. That is, say, ethnic, linguistic, or religious, or other differences. This is about gender equality. So if you take at least the gender equality within marriage and family, again, there's unequalness in the world. So some countries have put equality by legislation so that there's no discrimination based on any of the divisions that we can think of, not just gender, but other factors as well. These are designed to stop discrimination based on gender, race, religion, color, etc. Now, Belgium, Denmark, France, Latvia, Luxembourg, and Sweden, they have equality by legislation. So you cannot practice anything that discriminates one person from the other based on any of these, like gender, race, religion, etc. There's an Equality Act in USA installed in 1974. There's an Equality Act in the UK installed in 2010. So they are also trying to move towards complete equality, although that may not be the case. So if you take the gender gap by country, now the gender gap, that means the discrimination based on gender for males and females, is much less in the greener countries, but it's not as good in the pink or the red countries. And you can see where we are. So we have a lot more work to do to minimize gender gap as well. So if you're talking about equality, then the gender comes into that equation as well. Look at, for example, this is people who have emigrated to United Kingdom. And here you get a Punjab people and they come and establish a huge market and they will get on with their job. The reason is, and these are Sri Lankan people who are living in the UK. So Sri Lankans emigrated to UK at the moment, there are about 200,000 people. And they expect equality, job opportunities, social welfare, healthcare for free, and entrepreneurships because they are living in UK. And because of the equality diversity laws, which takes into account age, disability, ethnicity, religion, gender, marital status, pregnancy, etc. So all of people are considered equal. Most of these people who emigrated to the UK have done well. Most have reached, say, social class 1 jobs. But unfortunately, if the same people, you talk to them and ask, what do you do or what do you think about Sri Lanka? We don't really offer the same in Sri Lanka in the reverse. They talk more divisionally, no equality, nothing like that if you look at the backwards. So we have basically double standards, even people who understand the value of equality. So most are working for division and not for equality. The problem is the voter base goes along with the divisional politics. So I would just shown you, even people who have learned the value of equality and still talks about division when they talk about Sri Lanka. Thus, politicians also talk and promote divisional politics. If you can see any of the politicians that we talk, they don't really talk holistically. They don't talk to develop the country as a whole. They always talk a particular part, like an alliance or a Congress or a Balavege or whatever. They will talk only about this small fraction or a larger fraction of the community and not for all. So therefore, we don't have any proposals that are designed to improve everybody's living standards. So what we are trying to do in Leeds is try to teach people about this need of why divisional politics is not helpful and why equality is important. This is one of the areas. We all know Nelson Mandela, particularly for the juniors who may not know. He's a lawyer. He's a South African anti-apartheid revolutionary. And he's a political leader who served 27 years in prison, but still managed to become the first president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. Two statements from him I have extracted, which is very relevant for us today. A critical, independent, and investigative press is the lifeblood of any democracy. The press must be free from state interference. It must have the economic strength to stand up to the blandishments of government officials. It must have sufficient independence from vested investors to be bold and inquiring without fear of favor. It must enjoy the protection of the Constitution so that it can protect our rights as citizens. So a crucial aspect that we need to master, which is unfortunately not up to the standard at the moment. It is not our diversity which divides us. It is not our ethnicity or religion or culture that divides us. Since we have achieved our freedom, there can only be one division amongst us, between those who cherish democracy and those who do not. And unfortunately, we are seeing the results of this after independence from 1948. So a great democracy must be progressive, or it will soon cease to be a great democracy. So our democracy, if we want to maintain it, it has to be progressive. It has to give more opportunities, say, for example, education, improve skill development, say, more public investments, improve public services, healthcare, welfare, give more job opportunities, or give opportunities for people to develop jobs, and progressive ladder for all who are working. So this kind of thing, some progress is essential if the democracy survive. So democracy cannot succeed unless those who express their choice are prepared to choose wisely. The real safeguard of democracy, therefore, is education. And the real safeguard of proper democracy is also education. And that is as Leeds what we are trying to do. Take Mahatma Gandhi. We know he was an Indian lawyer who lived from 1869 to 1948. He led the successful campaign for India's independence from British rule. But he says, in true democracy, every man and woman is taught to think for himself or herself. Now that's more knowledge for people. But what he says is what is really needed to make democracy function is not knowledge of facts, but right education. So again, impresses on the need for educating the people. So that's what we are also trying to do basically. Now, there's a very large document about what democracy means by a Universal Declaration on Democracy. This was done in 1997 in Geneva. So, I mean, if somebody wants to, you can read that and see what democracy means. And the Leeds, as I said, is all about educating the voter base and the others so they make better decisions. And let's see what's happened to us. We got Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. We were called Ceylon before 1972. And we were called from 1970 to a free, sovereign, and independent Republic of Sri Lanka. Then in 1978, we became a Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. Now, this is Democracy Index. There's a democracy index for the world. And see where we are. We are here in this color, somewhere 6 to 7. So we are kind of called a flawed democracy, or we are nearing the hybrid regime. So it's a good thing that if we discuss as to see why we have become a flawed democracy, and that's what I'm planning to do at the next session. So what makes us a flawed democracy? And if you can contribute, please send whatever the information you have on this And also please contribute to the discussion because that matters so much. So leads, basically, we want equality, accountability, discipline, and freedom. And we want education to run for all the voters. And if you want to contact us, send something, you can just say admin and srilankaleads.com. And it's time for discussion. If you're talking, you will have to probably unmute yourselves, and this is open for us to discuss now. Any questions? There appear to be no questions today, so please do send me any questions if you have, or also any further suggestions that you have, because I would welcome that to make this progressive. An edited version of this will go on the YouTube, so it will be available for future reference for anyone who. I thank you all for joining today, and we'll see you next week at the same time, Sunday. Thank you very much.